There are over 8 billion people alive right now. We send cameras beyond the solar system, build skylines that slice through clouds, and whisper through fiber optics to anyone on Earth. But rewind to a time not so long ago, 75,000 years back, and the story changes. Fewer than 10,000 humans remained, not in cities, but clinging to life around scattered fires. One volcanic winter, one genetic bottleneck, could have undone us completely. In those brutal millennia, survival did not hinge on language, or clothing, or even fire, but on something smaller, sharper, something chipped from stone, with the panic of extinction breathing down their necks. A tool, a weapon, a turning point buried in dust and bone. If you're using these to fall asleep, that's literally why I make them. So, subscribe maybe, and tell me where you are and what time. I check comments, and it's always Vancouver at breakfast, Nairobi at bedtime, Patagonia somewhere in between. All at once, the same story reaching everywhere. Before it became a tool, it was just a rock. Cold, silent, waiting. Lying in the dust of a scorched savanna or buried beneath layers of wind-blown ash. The world these early humans inhabited was not one of abundance. It was unforgiving. Africa's climate fluctuated violently during the Middle Paleolithic. Ice ages pulsed across continents and then receded, leaving behind deserts, droughts, and shifting herds. Food vanished with the rains. Megafauna died in the hundreds. And in that chaos, isolated bands of anatomically modern humans wandered through windswept wastelands, carrying all their future in their arms or on their backs. There were no storehouses, no guarantees, just the knowledge passed from bloodied fingers to calloused hands that survival demanded more than endurance. It demanded invention. And then, somewhere along a riverbank or inside a limestone cave, one of them struck stone against stone, not for the first time, but perhaps differently, this time, and something split. A perfectly curved edge, razor sharp, unnatural in its precision. It was not just a flake, it was control over death. That edge changed everything. In one chipped instant, raw instinct became planned intention. The stone became an extension of the body, the mind, and something more foresight. With it, prey once too fast or too strong was now vulnerable. Bone was split. Hide was pierced. Firewood no longer had to be torn by hand, and behind every flake, a blueprint was taking shape, passed not in words, but in practiced rhythm. The angle of the strike, the hardness of the rock, the silence before it shattered. We call them flakes, scrapers, blades, but to them, they were lifelines. In the firelight, fathers showed sons, mothers taught daughters, a silent choreography, older than any language. One spark at a time, our ancestors began not just to survive, but to fight the silence back, to shape their world, cut by cut. But stone alone was not enough. A blade could kill, yes, but it could also speak without words. As these fragments grew more refined, patterns emerged. Regional styles, unique methods. Some blades were long and narrow, others wide and squat. The way a point was shaped in the Horn of Africa looked different than one flaked in the Nile Valley. It was not only survival that passed down, it was identity. A culture etched into obsidian, quartzite, flint, made by habit, bonded by kinship, and hardened by fire. Within these tools hid the first whispers of design, purpose, desire. Humans were no longer just reacting to the world. They were asserting themselves against it, leaving behind not just broken pieces of stone, but the first evidence that they understood time. They could imagine tomorrow, and in imagining it, they could prepare for it. That was the shift. That was the revolution hidden in a handful of shattered rock. But this revolution was not fast. It did not roar like engine fire or detonate like invention. It whispered. For tens of thousands of years, That same flake, the same trusted edge, traveled with bands of humans as they moved across floodplains, mountains, coasts. From southern Africa to the Levant, to the icy thresholds of Eurasia, the blade was there. The hands that made it changed. Their faces changed. Their gods and fears and stories took new shapes, but the rhythm of stone on stone remained. And in that rhythm was something profound continuity. When everything else around them collapsed or evolved, the flake endured. Not because it was perfect, but because it worked. And in that quiet consistency, humanity found more than just survival. They found memory, not written in ink, but in scars along a blade. The Stone Age tool that changed everything did not blaze across the sky. It sat humbly in the hand, but it carried the world forward, one strike at a time. And yet, even as it carved paths through bone and bark, this tool held secrets still. Archaeologists have discovered caches tucked deep within ancient shelters, blades far too precise for mere hunting, arranged in deliberate patterns, offerings perhaps, or teaching kits, or something else entirely. Beneath layers of sediment, signs emerge of workshops, spaces not just of utility, but of ritual. Flint knapping wasn't just skill, it was ceremony. And like all ceremonies, it left echoes. A single shard, buried for 50,000 years, now whispers across the ages, of a girl who learned to strike stone beneath her mother's gaze, of a boy who watched the firelight catch the edge of a blade and dared to dream of something more. These tools weren't just for cutting, they were for remembering, for passing down the knowledge of hands older than history. And in that long chain of strikes, from the first spark to the shadow of skyscrapers, we see it. The origin of invention, the shape of our own becoming. It began with a stone and ended, eventually, with us. But history is never one path. Around 40,000 years ago, something new stirred again. In Europe's frozen valleys, Homo sapiens began arriving with these same blades, their flint echoing across ice and time. Yet they were not alone. Neanderthals' stockier, ancient cousins had been shaping tools of their own for hundreds of thousands of years. What followed wasn't war, not exactly. It was overlap, exchange, and perhaps even mimicry. We see it in the archaeological layers where Mousterian and Aurignacian artifacts intermingle. Did a Neanderthal child grasp a sharper blade and wonder who had made it? Did the last of their kind stare across a fire at a face not unlike their own, the edge of survival tilting with every flake? Whatever passed between them, it did not last. The Neanderthals vanished, but their story is etched into ours. Some of their blood remains, some of their tools were taken. In the end, stone remembered them too. That blade, once born from desperation, had become something more than survival. It had become legacy, carried into the future by hands that never knew its name, but felt its weight and trusted it. And yet, there remains a deeper silence we still can't crack. In some buried strata, beneath blackened cliffs, or sealed in the calcified clay of ancient riverbeds, archaeologists uncover blades, unlike others, too symmetrical, too pristine, tools untouched by wear, nestled side by side as if placed with intention, not discarded. What purpose did they serve? Were they tokens of mourning? Trophies of visions now lost to time? Artifacts not of use, but of meaning? This is the haunting truth that even as the edge defined us, made us, saved us, it also shrouded pieces of ourselves in mystery. Because every flake not only revealed our mind, it concealed our fears. We shaped the stone, yes, but the stone shaped our story. What we valued, what we feared losing, what we hoped would last after the flesh was gone. And even now, thousands of generations later, when satellites circle the globe and machines speak in silicon tongues, We are still holding that same question, still flaking away at the dark, trying to see ourselves in the sparks. It was always more than just a tool. It was, and still is, a mirror. In the end, the stone edge did more than cut through meat and marrow. It carved through time itself. Today, when archaeologists hold those ancient shards between gloved fingers, they're not just studying objects, they're listening to moments preserved in flint. The hesitation of a first strike, the precision of a master's hand, the persistence of a species that refused to vanish. And maybe that's the lesson. That progress isn't always loud. Sometimes it's chipped, patiently, deliberately, in the shadow of extinction. The Stone Age tool that changed everything didn't just allow us to hunt or defend. It allowed us to imagine, to pass on, to build not just shelters, but futures. One flake at a time, one spark in the dark. That is the story we still carry, in every wire we weave, every metal we forge, every possibility we chase. It all began with a stone, and it never truly ended. Even now, in quiet museum drawers or sun-lanced dig sites, these ancient blades still cast shadows. Not literal ones, but legacies stretching across our modern world. The surgical steel of a scalpel, the beveled edge of a chisel, the engineered facets of a smartphone screen, all of them descendants in form, if not in function, from that primal edge. Tool-making became technology. Technology became civilization. But at its heart remains that same primal desire to control chaos, to shape the world with intention. The stone taught us motion, taught us rhythm, taught us sacrifice. It humbled our flesh, but sharpened our minds. Maybe that's why the earliest tools still call out from their silent graves, not as relics of a dead era, but as echoes of our own beginnings, reminding us that before all of this, before the satellites and cities and servers, there was simply a hand, a stone, and the will to make something more. We imagine progress in loud moments, explosions, declarations, discoveries. But sometimes it begins in silence. The silence of a mother watching her child mimic a strike. The silence of a hunter tracing a groove with calloused thumbs before breaking through bone. The silence of a burial, where tools were laid by the head, as though memory itself could be napped into permanence. That edge, born from urgency, guided by ancestors we barely remember, continues to shape how we define intelligence, inherit knowledge, and honor craft. Every skyscraper that breaks the sky owes something to that first fracture of stone. Every algorithm that models the future echoes that earliest intent to pass something on. Through every spark and every silence, the blade speaks. A whisper from the past that still cuts clean through the present. And maybe that is the enduring brilliance of the Stone Age tool. It gave us more than survival. It gave us story. That story is not just ancient, it is ongoing. Buried in the way we solve, the way we teach, the way we remember. In the nervous grip of a child holding their first pencil. In the practiced hand of a craftsman shaping wood or steel with surgical precision. In code written line by someone who's never touched stone but still feels the rhythm. It is the same instinct, the same spark, to make something that lasts, something that matters. Our tools have changed in shape and scale, yes, but their purpose remains eerily consistent. They are bridges between mind and material, between generations, between what is and what might be. And at the origin of them all, waiting quiet in the dust, was that first chipped edge, primitive in appearance, profound in consequence. The Stone Age tool that changed everything didn't just light the fire beneath our survival. It lit the one behind our eyes, the one that never stopped burning. And so, beneath every circuit board, Woven between the lines of code and etched into the blueprints of every modern marvel, lies something older than language, older than belief. A memory of stone, of hands learning to shape the unyielding. That legacy hums beneath the heartbeat of every innovation, because creation isn't just invention, it is inheritance. We are, each of us, heirs to that first deliberate fracture, to the silhouette of a blade held against twilight, and the realization that this could change everything. And it did. From bone to bronze, iron to silicon, we have always gone forward by looking back, listening to the oldest lessons hidden in the quietest places, in a flake of stone, in the echo it leaves behind. A reminder that survival is just the beginning. The real story begins when we choose to remember and to carry the edge onward. Because even after we forged iron and lit cities, part of us still knelt in the dust, flint in hand, chasing the perfection of a single edge. That primal moment when intention met resistance and chipped away at reality echoes through the centuries. It shaped how we learn, how we teach, how we build. It influences the curve of our tools, the gravity of our rituals, the weight we place on things handed down. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is not a relic. It is a shadow stitched into our DNA. Every time we master a new material, every time knowledge is passed by demonstration rather than words, the rhythm returns. Quiet, steady, eternal. Artisans still dream in angles. Engineers still think in fractures. Somewhere, right now, someone is creating something they hope will last. And though they may never know it, their hands are following that same ancient choreography, stone against stone, mind against fate. That original strike still resonates, unchanged in its essence, humming softly beneath the noise of progress. Not just a tool, a threshold. And we crossed it once, with trembling hands and a will that refused to vanish. In the blur of our accelerating future, where machines learn and virtual worlds replace soil underfoot, we still ache for something tangible, something old, something true. That ache is ancestral, a ghost in our grip every time we hold a tool and feel, without words, that we are not alone, that a million hands came before ours, bracing against cold, slicing through sinew, carving symbols into stone not to survive, but to be seen. That need has never left us. It is the pulse behind our monuments and microchips, our myths and machinery. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never just about utility. It was a declaration, a whisper into the cosmos, that even in the face of extinction, we will shape, we will remember, we will endure. And as long as we do, that edge will never dull. It will live on not in the stone, but in the spark. The same spark that lit the first fire. The same fire that still burns, flickering from one generation to the next, trusting that someone will pick up a piece of the past and make it future once more. And maybe that's the truest legacy of that chipped flake, that it taught us not just how to survive a harsher world, but how to pass through it with meaning, not just to carve, but to connect. The blade forged kinship between generations, between strangers on opposite ends of a tundra, between a clanswoman shaping obsidian in silence and a modern mind decoding her movements millennia later. It tethered us to each other, to wonder, to memory, and that link has never fully broken. In every innovation, there is an echo of that primal act, a gesture that says, "We were here. We saw. We endured." The Stone Age tool that changed everything may lie buried now, stone dark and silent, but even in its stillness, it whispers. Not of what we were, but of how we became. One spark, one edge, and the endless will to remember through creation. The story continues. Wherever there are hands and hope, stone and firelight, silence, and the will to shape it. Somewhere, deep inside a cave whose entrance hasn't felt breath in 20 millennia, a single blade still rests. Curved like a crescent moon, untouched by time yet sculpted by hands long gone, it waits in silence. Not for discovery, perhaps, but for remembrance. Because the Stone Age tool that changed everything does not end in museums or monographs. It ends in us, in hands poised to create, in minds stirred by ancient echoes. It ends in every moment we touch the material world with thought and intention. And perhaps that is why it still matters, why we feel something when flint shines under dust, when old edges catch new light. Because it's not about where we came from, but how far a single spark can travel. Through extinction and ember, myths and migrations, it still glows. Fragile, fierce, unfinished, just like us. That glow, that ember of first intention, is the thread that binds every chapter of human ascent. From cave walls to code, from flint-sparked flame to quantum circuits, its trajectory is curved like the blade itself, never a straight line, but always forward. And what began as a survival tactic became a template for meaning, a language of problem and possibility chiseled into every civilization we've ever built. There was no guidebook, no divine blueprint, only the shape of need and the courage to meet it with hands and stone. So when we marvel at the stars, or sculpt the improbable from the intangible, we are not as distant from that first stone as we imagine. We are its latest iteration, born of fire, tempered by memory, propelled by the same quiet oath to shape the world before it shapes us. The blade does not end here, it reappears, in plastic and steel and algorithms, but its soul is older than any of these. And as long as we create with intention, as long as we carry that ember forward, the story will go on. One spark, one edge, infinite beginnings. And so the edge endures, not only in stone, but in the silence behind each creation, in the flare of recognition when something ancient re-emerges through invention. That first chipped blade wasn't merely a tool, but a promise etched into time, that humanity would always find a way to shape what it feared, to honor what it loved, and to pass on what it learned. Beneath our digital reflections and concrete towers still beats the rhythm of strike and spark, of risk and response. We carry it in our sciences, our rituals, our imaginations. We carry it even now, generation after generation, without knowing, shaping tomorrow with the same trembling certainty that once held a flint in the firelight. That is the true legacy of the Stone Age tool that changed everything, not just what it built, but what it still makes possible. Connection, continuity, creation, and in that, the edge is eternal. The story still burns, just beneath the surface, waiting for the next hand to reach back and carry the flame forward. If that flame ever dies, it will not be because we forgot how to strike stone, but because we stopped listening to what it taught us. That creation is more than cleverness, that it is a kind of memory, transferred not through time, but through hands. And so even in the cold hum of server farms, or the sterile stillness of laboratories orbiting Earth, some part of that first fire remains, alive not in the blaze, but in the quiet act of making, of daring, of shaping the world with nothing but what was within reach. That is where the Stone Age tool still lives. In the questions we ask, in the risks we take, in the humble belief that another edge can be found, another light can be struck. And when it is, in whatever form it takes, it will carry forward the promise buried deep in that ancient blade. The promise that we were here, and still are, that from stone we chose to rise. Because rise we did, not in leaps, but in long arcs drawn by persistence and ingenuity. The story of that blade is not just etched in obsidian or fossilized in cave floor dust. It lives in the arc of every hammer, the line of every poem, the orbit of every satellite. It lives in how we refuse to vanish, how we carry memory forward not in blood alone, but in form and function, in fire and fracture. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never just about cutting, it was about creating, carving reality into something legible, survivable, meaningful. We shaped it, and in return, it shaped us. And it will go on shaping us. For as long as hands seek tools, as long as sparks leap from stone, as long as someone somewhere looks at the world and dares to change it, one edge at a time. So when we wonder what separates us from all the other creatures that once walked beside us, it's not just language, or art, or fire. It's that blade, that first decision to shape permanence from impermanence, to carry intent in something as fragile as stone. We could have waited, faded like the mammoths and lions of the Ice Age, but we didn't. We reached down, felt the weight of the earth in our palms, and struck a future from it. That strike echoes still. In every design that seeks to outlast the moment, in every lesson handed down without words, in every hand that quivers before creating something new, the Stone Age tool that changed everything didn't end with us mastering the world. It began with us understanding that we could. One shard, one vision, one enduring flame. Against the dark, we never stopped pushing back. And perhaps, in the quiet corners of each of our lives, the legacy continues in ways unseen, not with stone, but with code, not with flint knapping, but with mentorship, craftsmanship, defiance in the face of extinction's echo, a hand guiding another through the harshness of a world still indifferent, still wild in its own way. Each time we trace our fingers along the edge of a tool, a circuit, a dream, we are repeating the gesture of that ancestor who sat alone before firelight. Pressure flaked a curve into stone and whispered a vow into the silence. To persist, to pass it on. And so it passes, from dusk to dawn, from darkness into thought, reminding us that what we hold today began as survival and became meaning. The Stone Age tool that changed everything wasn't just the beginning of humanity, it was the beginning of forever. Forever for us was not promised, not then, not now, but in that first chipped edge, that quiet strike struck beneath a collapsing sky, we wrote a hope that outlived catastrophe. We embedded our will into something harder than flesh, something time itself could not forget. And that's why, for as long as we build and break and begin again, the Stone Age tool that changed everything will follow. It will echo in the hum of electricity, the slide of fingers across glass, the pause before a child solves what once seemed unsolvable. It will hum beneath every innovation, not as origin myth, but as foundation, as reminder, that, from the brink of vanishing, we chose to create. That even in extinction's shadow, we shaped the light, and that edge, still sharp beneath millennia of dust, will wait for the next hand, the next spark, the next story to be carved. Because some stories are too sharp to dull, even across the ages. The blade that sliced through muscle also cut through forgetfulness. It holds still the curve of thought, the rhythm of survival, the artistry of hands that refuse to fade. And in our finest moments when we craft, when we question, when we endure, we channel that same ancient brilliance. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is not stuck in the past. It lives in every beginning, buried deep in the marrow of human purpose, a silence that speaks, a fragment that endures, a promise struck in stone and carried, against impossible odds, into now. The spark is still with us, and we are still shaping the dark. And maybe that's what we've been doing all along, shaping the dark, turning the void into vision, the unknown into memory. That first chipped blade wasn't the end of prehistory or the start of civilization. It was the birth of intention, of idea, of meaning, wrestled into form. And that meaning never faded. It evolved. Each generation took that edge and pressed it forward into bronze gleam, iron clang, silicon whisper. But deep beneath all the upgrades and empires and elegy remains that original pact that we would not disappear without leaving a mark, not just of our flesh, but of our will, that we would split stone to say we were here, and we saw, and we chose not to fade. The blade was just the beginning. The story it started is still being written, and as long as creation rises from silence, that edge will never truly dull. It cuts still not just through time, but through the heart of what it means to be human. So let it be said plainly, the Stone Age tool that changed everything was not merely the spark of our past, it is the silhouette of our entire arc. It taught us, in silence and fracture, that to endure is to create, to shape fear into function and intention into legacy. And whether we find it cradled in sediment beneath ancient sands, or echoed in the architecture of our boldest machines, it reminds us gently, firmly, that human greatness is built not in revolutions alone, but in repetition, in the simple sacred act of trying again, chipping away, layer by layer, until meaning emerges, until memory becomes future. The edge lives on, in art, in code, in hands, weathered by craft and minds, lit by wonder. We are not just the descendants of survival. We are the architects of remembrance, still shaping, still sparking, still daring to strike light from stone. And so, the final truth glows quietly, not as a climax, but as a continuation. That the blade, chipped by lost hands in forgotten valleys, was never meant to be the end of a chapter. It was the opening line of the human story. A story etched not with ink, but with intention. Because in every line drawn, every tool shaped, every fire sparked or language spoken, something of that first edge sings. It is legacy without name, origin without end. The Stone Age tool that changed everything reminds us that progress is less about speed and more about meaning. That brilliance can come from persistence, not just genius. That when existence wavered on the edge of extinction, it was not luck that saved us. It was the refusal to stop shaping the dark. The blade still echoes, still waits, still dares someone, anyone, to strike it again, to pass on the spark, to write the next line. So here, at the end and the beginning, we are reminded, the Stone Age tool that changed everything is not lodged in dusty display cases, nor sealed within scholarly texts. It is alive in every quiet moment where curiosity meets need, in classrooms where a child reshapes paper into possibility, in refugee workshops where hope is carved from scrap, in operating rooms where steel honors the flint that came before it. These echoes are not ancient, they are immediate. They whisper through the hands of artists, tinkerers, survivors, dreamers, all linked by that same pulse, that same fracture line across time. We did not just inherit stone, we inherited the will to shape it. And though the form changes, the fire does not. So let us strike again, slowly, deliberately. One flake, one dream, one spark into the waiting dark. And maybe that's all we ever needed: the will to strike, the courage to craft. Not because it guaranteed survival, but because it kept the story going. Through droughts and deluges, through migrations and miracles, the hands that shaped stone never asked for certainty. They carved in defiance of it, and in doing so, etched the blueprint of who we became. Not perfect, not invincible, but enduring. In a world that still trembles with uncertainty, perhaps the truest inheritance is not the tool itself, but the thread it weaves between now and then, the knowledge that we are never creating alone. Behind every edge, every line drawn in flame or code or hope, is the echo of that first act of faith, that shaping the dark is worth it, that the spark can be passed, and that, even in silence, the blade remembers. This is where it leaves us, not with an ending, but with an invitation to pick up what was never truly put down, to feel the weight of beginnings in our own hands. The Stone Age tool that changed everything asks nothing of us but this: to remember that creation is a choice, a quiet, patient, often lonely one. But in that choice lies power. The same power that once split open marrow and meaning now hums behind every act of making. Every rough sketch on a page, every prototype carved under flickering light, every signal sent across the void. It is all the same gesture, repeated across millennia, an echo of that first strike into stone. A reminder that even when the world grows loud and fractured, the edge remains, waiting, still sharp, still sparking, for whoever dares to shape the dark again. So when that final flake falls, when the sound of stone striking stone fades into geological quiet, what remains is not just archaeology, it is ancestry, a memory shaped by risk and hope, a message across time that beginnings are never behind us, only beneath us, waiting to be unearthed, reignited. The Stone Age tool that changed everything did not evolve into complexity, it evolved into connection, into the knowing that each act of creation echoes the first. And perhaps that is the most enduring truth of all. We were not saved by strength or speed or shelter, but by the courage to make, to leave behind something sharper than survival, something that would outlast us. The story does not end with the last flame or final strike, it waits, always, in the silence before the next. Because the edge never dulled, it simply passed hands, and now, it's ours to carry forward, one spark at a time. And if we listen closely beyond the hum of servers, beyond the breathless chase for novelty, we can still hear it. The strike, the spark, that primal rhythm that once beat in time with survival now pulses through our every creation. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never silent. It has always spoken through what we choose to build, share, save. Its voice echoes not from the stone itself, but from the will it carried, the defiance of extinction, the embrace of transformation. We are still making, still shaping, still reaching forward into shadow with calloused hands and wild hope. And in that act, no matter our tools or tongues, we become the same hunter crouched near a fire, the same child watching stone split in her parents' grasp. We become part of the edge, part of the flame, part of a story too ancient to end. So remember, what we make echoes. What we choose to shape will outlive us, and every spark we strike might just be the next beginning. Somewhere, a child bends over a blank page, a potter shapes clay beneath cracked fingernails, an engineer tightens a final screw, and though they will never meet, they form a chain forged not from bloodlines alone, but from intention bound to action. This is the echo of that first blade, still ringing across time. It reminds us that enduring is not enough, we were made to become. To strike not just for survival, but for meaning. The Stone Age tool that changed everything wasn't just a turning point in history. It was the rise of agency, of vision. And though the flint has long cooled, its shape lives on in every bold gesture, in every trembling attempt to leave a mark. So as long as our hands reach forward, as long as the silence calls to be shaped, the edge endures. Beneath steel and silicon, behind algorithms and ambition, it waits not as artifact, but as origin, not as an ending, but as the first word of every new beginning. And if the edge could speak, if the flake could utter all it had seen, it would not boast of conquest or dominion. It would tell of resilience, of hands trembling at twilight, of failure and repeat, of quiet triumph in the brushstroke of innovation. It would recount 1,000,000 forgotten names who dared to leave something behind. And that, stripped of myth and memory, is the inheritance that binds us, not the stone, but the strike, not the flame, but the will to light it again. Even now, in this tangled present of climate warnings and pixel-slick futures, that ancient rhythm returns, in every act of care, in every creation born from doubt, in every mind that questions, plans, shapes. The Stone Age tool that changed everything does not rest in the past. It waits in our palms, in our thoughts, in that second before forward begins. And now, as ever, it is our turn to strike, to spark, to shape the dark once more. So as we stand here beneath the hum of electricity and beneath the hush of memory, we are not the end of the line. We are its continuation, a breath drawn after millennia of exhale, holding in our hands the legacy of that first fracture. The Stone Age tool that changed everything still sharpens our boundaries between chaos and creation. It still guides the hand that molds, that codes, that carves. We are not separate from its story. We are its living edge, still shaping, still daring. And long after servers go silent and skylines fall back to forest, the strike will remain. Silent, perhaps, dust-covered, but ready, waiting for one more hand to reach forward, to press intention into form, and to begin, once more, the shaping of the dark. Because shaping the dark was never about mastering fear, it was about facing it, together. The blade was solitary, only in its birth. In its journey, it became communal, passed from hand to hand, father to daughter, mentor to student. Its edge carved not only tools, but trust. When we forge something today, be it a rocket, a story, a bridge, we are part of that lineage. And though the world now teems with noise, our boldest acts often still begin in silence. The silence before the word, the sketch, the solder, that hush is sacred. It's where creation still feels ancient. So let the last echo be not an ending, but an ember cradled between past and possibility. The Stone Age tool that changed everything still gleams not in brightness, but in persistence. Its shape mirrors our spirit. Its edge draws tomorrow. And from the quiet of forgotten valleys to the roar of the stars, we carry it forward. One strike, one story, one spark to shape the dark again. And so, with each iteration of invention, we are not merely progressing, we are remembering. The blade forged in desperation beneath a volcanic sky has become emblem and engine alike, powering the wild ambition of architects, artists, and thinkers who still chase that same ancient thrill, the joy of turning chaos into form. From hand axes to hyperloops, the thread has never frayed. It only weaves tighter, generations interlaced through creation. Look closely, and the edge is everywhere. In the patience of sculptors, the blueprints of coders, the instincts of caregivers nurturing futures unspoken. Every act of making is a strike in the lineage, a signal flared back through time that says, we are still here, still shaping, still daring the dark to answer our light. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is not behind us. It walks beside us. And every time we reach forward with open hands and a vision not yet real, we grip its handle once more. So let us remember this not as nostalgia, but as navigation. That the flake of stone held in an ancestor's palm was not just utility, but the first vote cast for a future where knowledge forged from failure becomes wisdom, where every strike, every revision, every quiet return to the workbench echoes that first moment when someone, somewhere, chose to create rather than collapse. As the blade passed through countless hands, so too did that choice, not once, but endlessly. And now, it stands with us, not in granite monuments or flawless machines, but in the humble, hopeful act of shaping what comes next. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is not waiting to be rediscovered. It is waiting to be continued. in the next sketch, the next attempt, the next spark scraped into being, a legacy not of stone, but of courage. And with hands reaching into the dark, we strike again not to survive, but to mean something. So this is where the edge brings us not to a finish line, but to a threshold. It asks us, as it once asked them, what will you shape next? Not just with tools, but with thought, with care, with conviction. The flint our ancestors struck bore no promise of outcome, only the possibility of change. That possibility still stands, glinting beneath dust and detail, reminding us that history was never about what was left behind, but what choices survived. And we, linked through time by that same rhythm of creation, now carry the strike forward, not to echo the past, but to answer it, to shape the dark again, not with fear, but with fire, one spark, one edge. The story continues, wherever creation dares the silence to speak. And from that silence, a question remains, what will be our flake? What will future generations unearth and cradle between fingers, wondering who we were, what we feared, what we hoped? Whether fashioned from carbon fiber or whispered in neural networks, our creations carry the same ancient mark, the will to continue, the courage to reach into unknowing and shape meaning from it. The Stone Age tool that changed everything may have been forged in desperation, but it endures in intention. In every act of building, breaking, rebuilding there lies the echo, the edge beneath the algorithm, the hum behind progress. It is not stone we must preserve, but the spirit it carried, a spirit that faced the void and dared to speak through spark and strike. So let the dark come, let silence settle. We will answer, as we always have, not with surrender, but with shaping. And in that shaping, we will remain. Still here, still daring, still pressing the edge outward into the unknown, into the future. Across centuries and upheaval, through flood and fire and fable, the edge endured because it was never just a fragment of stone, it was a fragment of will. Even as we drift farther from the caves and plains that birthed us, that same will to understand through making, to survive by shaping, to leave behind something that means more than marks in the dust, still thrums in the pulse of humanity. That is the untold secret of the Stone Age tool that changed everything. It was never about the blade alone. It was about the hands, the choice, the leap into complexity, forged from simplicity. And if there's a final truth, it's this: the edge never really leaves us. It pulls us forward still, quietly, relentlessly, beckoning with every raw idea, every uncertain attempt, every unlit corner of the world still waiting to be touched by flame. We were not made to fade. We were made to strike, to shape, to remember. One spark, one hand, one future, and the edge, always guiding it into the light. So if the spark has traveled this far through shattered stone and shipwrecked dreams, through cave soot and circuit boards, it deserves one last truth. The edge is now ours. Not the physical flake, but the idea behind it. That to make is to believe. That to carve meaning into the unknown is our inheritance and our oath. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never about flint, it was about faith. A faith carried not in creed, but in action, in every risk to build differently, in every shared moment, over ideas forged from bruised hands and burning need. And now, at this juncture of past and possibility, may we carry that will forward. Not as archaeologists of memory alone, but as architects of what comes next. Because the strike still echoes, it always will. In the dark, waiting. And somewhere ahead, a new edge waits to be born. Strike it well. Let it shine. Strike it well. Let it shine. Because wherever we go from here, however tangled our tools and complex our codes become, the story still arcs back to that first edge, worn smooth by time, but never by meaning. It reminds us that humanity is not just intelligence or endurance, it is intention. The power to shape possibility from pressure and imagination from necessity. And so we continue, one breath and one bold act at a time, carrying forward a legacy carved in silence and sparked in flame. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is not buried. It beats, quietly, fiercely, within us still, waiting not to be found, but to be continued. In our hands, in our hearts, in whatever shape the next tomorrow takes. One spark, one edge, always forward. So let this be our reminder, not of what we were, but of what we still are. Shapers in the dark, builders of echoes. The Stone Age tool that changed everything did not fossilize into silence, it transformed into voice. Ours. It moves in the rhythm of pulse and purpose, not bound by stone but liberated by spirit. And in each corner of creation, whether coded in AI or carved in clay, it hums in the background a resonance that knows no time. One edge, split from desperation, now spans generations not to preserve the past, but to ignite the future. We are not just inheritors of survival, we are keepers of the forge. And as long as we keep striking, keep shaping, keep daring, the legacy continues. Always forward, always burning one spark at a time. So now, standing on the shoulders of those forgotten hands, we face our own dark to shape. A darkness not of predators or famine, but of meaning lost in speed, connection buried beneath noise. And yet, the rhythm returns. In workshops lit by one brave bulb, in classrooms where children piece ideas into form, in the silence before invention dares to speak. That's the inheritance, the edge that does not rust, the flame that does not fade, the promise that speaks not of stone, but of purpose. The Stone Age tool that changed everything gave us more than survival. It gave us a language of action, a covenant between past and possibility. And now it is our strike to make. The silence is ready, the edge is near. It waits for hands to rise, for sparks to fly, for the next story to be shaped. One spark, one edge, always forward. And so it falls to us not to complete the story, but to keep it alive, to pick up where countless hands left off, not knowing who we'd become, yet believing something would follow. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is not a chapter in a history book. It is a challenge spoken in fracture and flame, a challenge to create with meaning, to shape with soul, to strike forward not just with skill, but with wonder. That first spark still travels through us, through every bridge built, every question asked, every future dreamed. And in that eternal rhythm, stone to spark, silence to story, we do not end. We continue, boldly, softly, together. One more edge, one more beginning, always forward, always lit by the fire we choose to carry. Because when all is stripped away, when the skies go dark and the noise of empire fades, we will still be what we have always been, makers in the dusk, reaching with trembling hands for a future not yet born. This is the oldest instinct, not to conquer, but to craft, not to dominate, but to define. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is not ancient because it is old. It is ancient because it is eternal. It reminds us that we are more than flesh on the wind. We are choices. We are change. A spark at the edge of silence, promising that as long as someone dares to shape the world with hope, the story will go on. So here we are at our beginning, again. With fire behind us and darkness ahead, we raise the edge one more time, and we strike. Always forward, always together, always alight. In this edge we carry, from the dust of ancient valleys to the data streams of today, lies a truth both humbling and transcendent. That humanity was shaped, not by dominance, but by deliberate creation, not by the force of survival alone, but by the quiet courage to make meaning in the face of uncertainty. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is still with us, not in its original form, but in the echoes of each new beginning we dare to forge. So, as the centuries bend and the world remakes itself yet again, may we remember that history's greatest turning points did not always roar, they often whispered. One edge, one vision, one enduring story carved not in stone alone, but in the soul of those who refuse to let the spark die. And with that final whisper, the flake falls, light catches its curve, and the dark waits once more to be shaped. Always forward, always burning. So let the light catch once more, not on glass or circuitry, but on that first sacred curve, the arc of meaning born from desperation, now reflected in every effort to create beyond ourselves. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never about stone at all. It was about seeing possibility where others saw only survival, about reaching beyond the now, carving futures with only instinct and grit. That blade, forgotten by time but not by consequence, is the reason we build cathedrals of thought, empires of innovation, bridges made of belief. And even now, as the world shifts beneath our feet, as tomorrow races toward us with impossible speed, we are still, at our core, just hands reaching for shape, for meaning, for connection. Flame still flickers, darkness still waits, and in the quiet before every creation, the edge still glows, carried not in stone, but in us. Always forward, always shaping, always still becoming. So we carry it now, this edge forged in fire and famine, tucked into the marrow of who we are. It is more than inheritance, it is obligation, not to replicate the past, but to respond to it, to let every act of wonder, every tool lent across time, every moment of teaching or making or dreaming, be a resurrection of that first vow carved in stone, that no matter how dark the future may seem, there is always light waiting to be struck. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never about the weapon it became, but the will it represented. So let us be worthy of it, not by building bigger, but by creating braver, not in monuments, but in meaning. From flint to fiber optics, the spark remains unchanged, carried by every hand, willing to strike, to shape, to begin again. This is not the end, this is the strike. Let it shine. So let this be the final ember, burning soft and steady in the long arc between past and possibility. The Stone Age tool that changed everything endures not as an artifact, but as a conviction that in shaping the world with our bare hands, we shaped ourselves. It lives not in the shard, but in the spark we refuse to let fade. And now, as we teeter at another threshold of transformation, may we strike again not out of fear, but of faith. Faith in our capacity to create with care, to craft meaning in the shadows, to pass forward not just tools, but truths, because somewhere, in a future we'll never see, another hand will reach forward, feel that ancient rhythm return, and know without words that the edge still waits, and that wherever there is darkness, there will always be someone, somewhere, ready to strike the light back into it. So from that first flake carved in silence to the pulse of machines dreaming in data, the story holds. We are the continuation, the bridge between longing and legacy. And though the landscapes have changed from wind-swept plains to glass-covered skylines, the hunger remains the same. To shape something that matters, to leave behind more than survival. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never just about what we made, it was about why we kept making. A promise carried across time, not in stone, but in spark. In the belief that what begins in the dark can lead us to light. That where one hand dares to strike, the world might follow. So here we are, still forging ahead, still listening to the silence, still shaping the future, one edge, one echo, one eternal flame at a time. So as the edge glows faintly within us, across continents and contradictions, may we remember this. It was never the shape of the tool that mattered, but the intention behind the strike. Not the flint alone, but the meaning we carved from it. In a world still grasping for clarity, still wrestling with fragmentation, that ancient gesture offers guidance, a rhythm that says creation is resistance, memory is motion, and each new spark is a rebellion against forgetting. The Stone Age tool that changed everything did not leave behind instructions. It left behind a challenge to keep shaping through uncertainty, to keep forging connection from chaos. And as long as someone dares to press form from silence, to reach forward without knowing, the story continues. From their hands to ours, from this breath to the next, the edge is still lit. Always forward. One spark, one echo, one world shaped and reshaped again and again and again. And perhaps that's the meaning we were always meant to make, that no matter how distant we grow from raw stone and survival fires, we are never far from the strike that made us possible. The Stone Age tool that changed everything left more than fragments behind it, embedded a reminder in the core of who we are, that creation is courage, that to stand in the dark, with nothing but our bare hands, and still dare to shape the world, is the truest mark of being human. So as this story, this arc of an ancient edge, fades into soft shadow, let it stay with us, not as a memory, but as a living rhythm, one we carry in every risk taken, in every spark shared, in every word spoken into the unknown. The flake falls, the fire flares, the hands rise, and once again we shape the dark, always forward. One final spark, and the light is yours. Let that light be yours not to follow, but to forge. For the Stone Age tool that changed everything was never just a beginning. It was an invitation, a reminder that no matter how fractured the world becomes, no matter how loud the noise or deep the uncertainty, the most powerful act remains unchanged: to create with purpose, to reach with wonder, to strike with hope. That same edge, born in a flicker of survival, carries within it the blueprint for meaning, for memory, for all that binds the past to the possible. And now, as the spark passes into your hands, the silence waits again, not for echoes, but for answers. Shape them well. Let the fire endure. Let the edge speak anew. And when you do, know this: the story is not behind you. It burns ahead. Always forward, always lit. One final strike, and the light becomes yours. Because in the end, all we ever needed was that one truth carved into rock and carried through the ages, that meaning is not found, but made. That when everything else falls away, tools rust, cities fall, memories fade, what remains is the will to craft light out of dark. The Stone Age tool that changed everything wasn't about mastering the earth. It was about understanding that we could shape it, and in shaping it, shape ourselves. So now, as we close this long whisper of history, let this be the only thing remembered: that the flint still waits, not behind glass, but in every act of reaching forward with unsteady hands and unwavering heart. The edge is not gone. It is alive, gleaming just below the surface of everything we dream. One spark, one breath, one future still burning in the dark. And we, shapers of silence, carry it forward not for the past, but for the yet to come. So may this be the last breath before the flame is past. Not an ending, but a quiet nod to everything that brought us here. The Stone Age tool that changed everything showed us the power of one action, intent, carved into permanence. It asked no applause, left no grand architecture behind, only a shape etched with hope. And now, across time's long arc, we hold its echo, in every innovation sparked by vision, In every kindness forged from will, in every gesture that dares to make light from the dark. That is its legacy. Not the stone, but the reach. Not the tool, but the meaning behind its edge. And if we are to honor it, we need not invent greatness, only continue the courage to create. So let this final spark rise like the first silent, eternal, igniting nothing less than the fire inside us. One hand, one strike, one light ahead, always forward. And so the fire continues, not because we fan it blindly, but because we understand now what those first hands knew all along. That meaning is made in silence, long before it speaks. The Stone Age tool that changed everything did more than let us cut meat or shape wood. It carved open the space in which possibility could take root. That same space lives inside every act of creation today, whether in a sentence begun without knowing the end, or in a circuit sparked into life. It isn't about the blade anymore. It never fully was. It's about us, what we dare to build, what we choose to carry forward, what we keep alive, not in monuments, but in moments. So, as the final ember dims and the darkness hushes, remember this: the fire is not gone. It has simply changed hands, and the edge, waiting as it always has, is still there, patient and ready. For the next story, for the next spark, for the next soul willing to shape the dark into light, always forward, flame to flame. One last strike and the future begins again. So let this be the last breath before the future turns its page. Not in grand finale or closing chord, but in the quiet continuity of creation. We are not the end of the edge, we are its echo, reshaped. What those first hands began, with flint and fire, we carry in circuits and compassion, in every small act where vision meets will. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never just a moment. It was a mindset, a motion forward that refused to stop. And as long as we choose to craft with care, to strike against the unknown with something more than fear, the story carries on, not as history, but as heartbeat. The edge remains, not dulled by time, but sharpened by purpose. So now, beneath the weight of all that came before, and all that has yet to come, we raise our hands once more, trembling, defiant, alight. The spark is still ours. Carry it well, always forward. One last strike, and the dark becomes future once again. So here we go, one last time, standing not at the end, but at the edge of memory, of possibility, of everything still waiting to be made. The Stone Age tool that changed everything endures not as some relic buried in soil, but as a rhythm etched into our bones. It is the heartbeat of builders, the breath of thinkers, the silent companion of all who dare to shape rather than surrender. In every cracked finger-tracing blueprints, in every whispered idea scribbled into dawn, in every moment when something is born from nothing, it lives on. Not the blade alone, but the hand that held it. Not the strike alone, but the reason behind it. And as the spark arcs onward with all of time behind us and all of tomorrow waiting unlit, know that it is ours now, to hold, to wield, to pass forward like fire moving from torch to torch. Because the edge is not behind us. It burns beneath our skin. And now, with one final breath, we raise our hands. Not in farewell, but in promise. To shape once more, always forward, one spark, one story, forever burning. So may this be the ember we leave behind, not in ash, but in action. A glint in the twilight of history that whispers, we tried, we created, we mattered. The Stone Age tool that changed everything didn't grant us dominance, it granted us direction. From flint to future, it carved the narrow line between survival and significance. And though time will bury us as it always does, perhaps a spark remains in the hands of someone not yet born. in a gesture not yet made, in a world not yet shaped. That is the legacy that the edge lives on, not in stone, but in spirit. And as long as we reach forward with hands willing to craft, to care, to carry the story, creation will never end, because the dark will always return. And so too will the spark. One last strike, always forward. And with that final strike, the edge passes once more quietly, deliberately into the hands of the unknown. Not as burden, but as beacon. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is no longer just an artifact of prehistory. It is a living principle, a call to courage in the face of chaos, a whisper beneath every act of making that says, creation is the language through which we defy disappearance. So let the silence come, let the shadows lengthen, because now, like then, we are ready. We carry within us all that came before the rhythm, the will, the fire. And as long as we strike with purpose, the story will not end. It will ignite. One more hand, one more spark, one enduring edge, lighting the dark into tomorrow and beyond. And so, tomorrow waits not as a certainty, but as an open shape, carved by every strike we choose to make. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is no longer about flint edges or fossilized dreams. It is about the decision we inherit each day to meet uncertainty with creation, to press meaning into moments that might otherwise vanish. Across centuries of light and dark, that decision has never abandoned us, because it is not held in tools, it is held in us. Whether we fashion satellites or stories, burn algorithms into silicon, or kindness into memory, the fire burns on. That edge, born in dust and desperation, has always known the quiet power of persistence. And now the flame rests in our hands, the silence wide open ahead. So strike it once more. Let it shine not for power, but for purpose. And may that light, however small, carry forward not as the end of a story, but as the next beginning. One last spark, always forward, always burning. The edge is yours now. And if this is the last spark we send into the dark, let it carry all that we were, builders shaped by silence, makers born of fire. The Stone Age tool that changed everything taught us that survival was never enough, that to endure was only the beginning. We had to shape, to share, to remember. And now, with the edges of memory thinning and the dawn of something vast behind every screen and skylight, we pass forward what cannot be reduced to artifact, a story, a belief that even in the coldest ash and the quietest cave, meaning waits to be made. So we strike again, not for glory, not for legacy, but for the simple, sacred act of reaching. The edge endures. The fire is lit. And wherever hands rise to shape what has never existed before, the story continues. One spark, one strike, one endless light, forever forward in the dark. So here, in the breath between what has been and what might be, we close the arc, not with a period, but with a promise, that whatever we craft from this moment forward, from tools coded in DNA to visions mapped in light, carries within it the echo of that first flicker. The Stone Age tool that changed everything still hums beneath our pulse, not because of the stone it bore, but because of the spirit it ignited, a spirit that dares to shape, to share, to risk meaning against oblivion. So as this final ember drifts into the long dark ahead, may it illuminate one truth: we were never just survivors, we were makers, memory, keepers, bringers of fire. And the edge, still gleaming beneath the dust of time, passes on not to end, but to begin again, always forward. One last spark, one enduring flame. The edge is yours now. So let this final spark settle into the darkness, not extinguished, but embedded, like that first flake pressed into uncertain soil. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never finished. It was a question left glowing in the hands of every age since. Not what can be made, but what should be made. Not how we will survive, but why we must endure with intention. And as this story ends, it does so as it began in silence, broken by one strike, one breath, one hand daring to begin. So carry the edge not as artifact, but as answer. And when your turn comes to shape the unseen, may that same fire rise in you, silent, fierce, unyielding, one spark more, forever forward. Because in the quiet of every creation, the edge still calls. It asks not for mastery, but for meaning, not for conquest, but for care. Its lesson was never how to dominate, only how to endure with dignity, how to carve the invisible into form with nothing but will and wonder. As the fire of this long story fades to ember, it leaves behind not silence, but an open sky, a space for the next spark. And perhaps that is the truest legacy of the Stone Age tool that changed everything, that it never truly belonged to the past. It belongs to the brave, to the hands that shape, to the hearts that remember, to the minds that dare. So take it now not as history, but as invitation. The darkness waits. The edge is ready. One more strike, one more light, always forward. And so, if the edge has taught us anything, it is that what we shape shapes us, not just in the fire-chipped silhouettes tucked into cave walls, but in every defiant flicker of innovation kindled across time, from the cracked knuckles of an ancestor flaking truth into stone, to the quiet hum of servers storing ideas too vast for bone to bear. The legacy remains alive, in motion, in memory, in meaning. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is not a relic to behold, but a rhythm to uphold. It reminds us that creation, at its core, is a choice to face the unknown with wonder rather than fear. And now, in this final breath before the dark lights again, we carry that rhythm forward into whatever awaits. The edge glows still. The silence listens. And in our hands, fragile but fierce, the spark begins once more. One strike, one will, one unbroken flame. The end is never the end. It is the beginning, again, always forward. So here we leave it, not behind in the dust of millennia, but ahead of us, still glowing, still guiding. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never about how sharp the stone was, but how sharp the will behind it remained. In every flicker of curiosity, in every trembling set of hands choosing to make rather than despair, we strike anew. Not to carve the past into stone, but to etch the present into possibility. As long as we dare to shape anything, be it a word, a bridge, a bond we fan, the flame first sparked by desperate brilliance so far back in time, its smoke still clings to who we are. One spark, passed through silence and survival. One edge, pressed from fear into form. And we shapers of the unseen keep it alive, not through perfection, but persistence. Let that be our legacy. Not what we made, but that we refuse to stop making, always forward, until time folds back into spark. And we strike one last time into the waiting dark. Because in the end, it was never just about stone. It was about belief, the belief that when all else slips away, when memory erodes and monuments crumble, a single act of creation can carry across time. The Stone Age tool that changed everything wasn't sharp because it cut. It was sharp because it mattered, because it refused to be forgotten. And now, as the flame narrows to its final glow, that edge does what it always has done. It passes forward, into new hands, into new silence, and with it travels every story, every spark, every echo that once dared to speak through fracture and fire. So let your hands rise. Let your breath steady. Let the dark settle around you. And when you're ready, strike. One more time. One more spark. Forever forward. And if this final flicker reaches far enough, may it land not as conclusion, but as catalyst for someone, somewhere, staring into their own abyss with nothing but an impossible dream and a will that will not break. Let them feel it. Not the weight of history, but the lift of lineage, a spark whispered through time, saying even this moment can be shaped. That edge, once born in fracture and fear, still cuts through the silence, still opens the way. So let this not be an ending sealed in narrative, but an ember placed in careful hands, hands that will carry it forward, hands that will strike the dark and wait for light. One more time, one more spark. The flame is yours now. Shape it well, and always, always forward. And so, the final breath lingers not as an ending sealed by time's dust, but as a door left cracked open, glowing faintly with the same ember that once lit flint beneath desperate skies. The Stone Age tool that changed everything does not rest in silence, nor in stone, but in this enduring choice. To rise each day, not content with survival, but stirred by the need to create. To pass forward more than knowledge, to pass wonder, shaped by rhythm and risk. That is the inheritance. That is the oath. And as long as someone reaches with calloused hands or trembling hope, the edge endures not as relic, but revelation. So if you felt the spark somewhere in this story, know this: you carry the edge now. Shape it, share it, and let it shine, always forward, into the dark that still waits to become something more. So we close not in shadow, but in inheritance. The flake has fallen, the fire has dimmed, but the meaning survives, not fixed in stone, but carried in every hand that dares to shape what does not yet exist. This is not just the story of a tool. It is the story of vision etched from necessity, of memory made tangible, of hope striking forward through silence. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was not the peak of innovation, but the first promise that with nothing but effort and flame we could ignite the infinite. And now, its echo rests in us, in minds still choosing wonder, in hands still crafting futures. So step forward, not as witnesses of history, but as its continuation. The edge is yours, the fire is lit. Shape it wisely, shape it well. One more time, one more spark, and the story begins again. So this is the last breath, the final flicker before we pass beyond the frame of story into the quiet after. The Stone Age tool that changed everything began as survival, but it became something greater, a constellation of efforts linked by meaning, not material. And in that constellation, we find ourselves reflected not in the perfection of what was built, but in the persistence of those who dared to build. From hunted plains to digital plains, nothing truly separates then from now but the shape of the spark. So let us shape ours with reverence. Let this truth echo beyond the last strike. We were not saved by what we made, but by why we chose to keep making. One final flame, handed forward, not as closure, but as charge, always forward, always becoming. The edge endures in our hands now, and ahead, in the dark, still waiting to be shaped into light. And so, with the echo of that original strike still humming through the centuries, we arrive at the edge one last time, not to mourn what once was, but to honor what still is. In a world that spins faster each day, where creation often feels buried beneath convenience, the ancient rhythm endures in every thoughtful act, every silent start, every soul brave enough to draw meaning from the unknown. That first blade, born in shadow and forged by instinct, left behind no monument but this, a lineage of courage, faceted through time. And now, the flint lies quiet once more, not forgotten, but fulfilled. because we shaped, and in shaping, we became. The darkness waits again, not with threat, but with promise. And as we lift our hands, flint no longer, but every tool of thought and wonder, we do not say goodbye. We say forward, one spark, one will, one world, still waiting to be shaped. So let this be the flare that does not fade, the final signal etched in breath and memory. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never just an object. It was an initiation into thought, into legacy, into a future we could not see, but chose to reach for anyway. And that act, the shaping of meaning from silence, remains untouched by time. It lives on in every risk that becomes revelation, in every dream pressed into matter. We were never meant to finish the story, only to carry it. And now, as the last words tremble into quiet, we stand not at the close, but at the coil of beginning. Flint or fiber, it makes no difference, the edge is yours. The light waits, and the fire, undaunted, burns on, one final spark, forever forward. And so we let the flames settle, not into silence, but into the spaces between now and next, between what we remember and what we are still daring to become. The Stone Age tool that changed everything is no longer a relic to revisit, but a rhythm to reawaken. It does not call for perfection, only participation for us to take the raw material of this moment and carve shape, connection, meaning. That first flake, struck in firelight and fear, set the course not just for survival but significance. And now, with centuries at our back and tomorrow stretching wide before us, we carry the same promise that no strike is wasted if it is forged with intent. The edge is still lit, the story is still ours. So walk forward with hands ready and heart steady, because from this point on, the spark belongs to you. Always forward. One last light. One enduring flame. And if this story must end, let it do so the only way it can, by returning to the fire that first lit it, the hand that first dared to reach. The Stone Age tool that changed everything does not ask for remembrance out of reverence, but out of readiness. That edge, once carved in trembling necessity, continues now in every step we take toward the unknown, not with fear, but with fire still glowing in our grasp. We are the continuation, the next strike in a line that circles through millennia like rings in stone. And so, as the spark dims and future waits, may this final breath not be of farewell, but of faith that somewhere, in a moment we'll never see, a hand will rise again, and the darkness will not win, because we struck it first, and we will strike it again. One spark, one edge, always forward. The fire is yours now. So this is where the ember rests, not extinguished, but handed gently into the future, sheltered by everything we've learned, everything we've dared to shape. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never a triumph of violence or power. It was a quiet defiance, a spark in the dark that said we refuse to vanish, that we will shape with care what chaos cannot touch. And as long as someone, somewhere, lights that same fire with hope, with purpose, with hands ready to craft the unseen into realness, then the edge lives on, not in stone, but in spirit, in gesture, in chit. And now, with this final breath, the story presses forward not as legend, but as legacy. You are holding it now. The edge, the spark, the will to strike. So go on. One more light. Always forward. The shaping never ends. So let this be the last ember we pass, not because the story is finished, but because the spark must now live elsewhere, in your hands, in the silence, before your next act of creation. The Stone Age tool that changed everything remains not in museums or memory alone, but in every bold step we take into uncertainty, guided by nothing more than the will to make meaning where none yet exists. This was never just about stone. It was always about spirit. And what began with a single chipped edge beneath a falling ash sky now continues through us, flaring forward across time's dark expanse. One edge, one fire, one final invitation. Shape wisely, strike truthfully, and always, always carry the story forward. And so, let the strike ring out one more time, not in farewell, but in faith. Faith that the story written in ash and ember still burns beneath the surface of even our most modern miracles. The Stone Age tool that changed everything wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of choosing hope over entropy, pattern over chaos, presence over vanishing. That choice, once made with flint and trembling palms, is now ours to make again with circuits, with song, with care. And as this final glow folds into quiet, what remains is not a relic, but a rhythm, an inheritance that asks nothing but this: that we keep shaping, that we keep listening, that we keep trusting the edge to guide us one spark at a time. Because even now, through screens and centuries, fires still begin with belief. And the next great beginning, like the first, waits only for one hand to reach forward and strike. So this is the ember we leave behind, not as closure, but as ignition. What began with a tremble of stone against stone now lives in the rhythm of everything we choose to shape with intention. The Stone Age tool that changed everything carries no instructions, no glory, only a sacred reminder that we are meant not just to survive, but to spark, to carve connection from chaos, to find light where others see only dark. And now, with time folding forward and the unknown widening once more, that legacy is not a story we look back on. It is the fire we carry. So walk on with open hands, with daring minds, with the quiet strength of those who once sat beneath stars and struck meaning from silence. One final edge, one lasting glow. The spark, now yours, may it burn brighter than ever, always forward. So this is where we end, not in silence, but in flame. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never the finale. It was the ignition, a spark drawn from stone, now stretched across every wire, woven into every dream daring to endure. We carry it not as history, but as heartbeat. And as the last edge glints in twilight, we are reminded our greatest inheritance is not what we made, but the fact that we never stopped making. The fire is not behind us. It is within us, lit by those who struck before, waiting now for us to strike again. One final flare, one endless echo. The edge is yours. Let it shine, always forward. So let this final edge be not a farewell, but a flare set into motion, a reminder that the tool which once saved us from the brink did so not through force, but through faith in each other, in the unknown, in the enduring act of making. The Stone Age tool that changed everything taught us that the simplest spark can cast the longest light. And as its echo fades not into silence, but into continuation, may we carry that spark gently, boldly, into every invention, every kindness, every stitched moment of creation still ahead. The dark is wide, the edge is near. Let this be the strike that begins again, always forward. One last breath, one last spark, and then the future is yours to shape. And as the story settles into its final breath, let us remember not all fires roar. Some glow quietly in the hands of those who dare to shape, to remember, to continue. The Stone Age tool that changed everything was never asking to be idolized. It asked to be used, passed, evolved. And now, at the edge of time and intention, we hold that same spark, not as a closing note, but as a calling, a whisper carried through generations, reminding us that even the simplest edge, struck in silence, can ignite an eternity. So go forward. Shape wisely. Carry gently. And when the darkness gathers again, raise your hand, as they once did, not in fear, but in fire. One last strike, one endless light. The story is yours now. Burn brightly. Always forward. So let the light not flicker out, but pass on deliberate, enduring, into the waiting dark of all the tomorrows ahead. The Stone Age tool that changed everything did more than start a fire, it taught us how to carry one. Across rivers of ash, through silence and survival, it sparked the lineage of makers who choose, even now, to create with care. And if this is the last word of the tale, let it not be a closing sigh, but a rising breath, the kind drawn when hands prepare to strike, when minds prepare to shape. For the edge is not just behind us, it is always ahead, forever waiting, forever glowing. One last spark, one lasting flame. The story continues wherever you carry it, always forward. So let it end as it began, not with triumph nor farewell, but with a spark, a reminder that the tool which carved our way through oblivion was never just stone, but the will behind it. The will to create when all seemed lost, to shape when fear loomed large. That edge, first struck in trembling desperation, now gleams in the quiet resilience of every act that dares to matter. It does not fade. It waits in new forms, in new hands, in the silence that comes before the flame. So carry it not as artifact, but as invitation. And when the dark gathers once more, when the world holds its breath before becoming, let that ancient rhythm rise in you, steady, certain, eternal. The last strike is never the end. It is only the next beginning, always forward, one spark, one edge, one fire, still lit.